Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the channel. Make sure you like the video, subscribe. We are currently 17 subscribers away from 2,000. Reaching that would be a major milestone for the channel, and we are trying to reach it before April 1st. We have about a week left, but I think we can do it, so subscribe. You never know if you're going to be the one to make us hit 2,000. But on April 1st, amongst other elections which we will be covering live, there will be a critical Wisconsin Supreme Court election on the ballot. This will determine control of the Supreme Court. Incumbent liberal Justice Ann Walsh Bradley is retiring. Liberals have supported Susan Crawford, while conservatives have supported Brad Schimmel. This race is looking down the wire, so I will say first and foremost, if you live in Wisconsin, get out and vote. Early in-person voting has already started, so I would recommend you vote for Brad Schimmel. I myself have donated to his campaign. Also, you can do stuff like download the Early Vote Action app and text voters in Wisconsin to help support Brad Schimmel. There's many ways. The link to his campaign will probably be in the description. But this race is looking down the wire. As you've seen in polling, Brad Schimmel, while he started off ahead, this was mostly name recognition. Susan Crawford has taken a slight lead in polling. I do think that Wisconsin polling for an election like this is nearly useless. Uh, Early voting is a much better indicator on how an election like this is going to end up. You know, I, there is there's a good chance that this polling could be off by like 10 points or more. I wouldn't be shocked by that. That's not saying that, Susan Crawford's going to win by 15, final prediction, or Brad Schimmel's going to win by 5, final prediction. I'm just saying, take it with a grain of salt. But what you've seen in most of these polls is that Susan Crawford has just about hit her ceiling of mid to high 40s. Um, Most of these polls show her at 40%. Brad Schimmel, well, he started off, mid to low 40s. He fell off a little bit there. I do think most of that is turnout. I think the turnout in this race has changed a lot. Also, including will not vote in the undecideds portion is just why they're not undecided. They're not going to vote. But the main thing is it's very hard to add likely voter screens for a race like this where you don't know who is going to turn out whatsoever. So take these with a grain of salt, but you have seen Susan Crawford just about hit her ceiling. I will say one, two, three are from the same group, all released at once to show Schimmel was down by like 13, but most of the undecideds have broken for him. So there is a chance that Schimmel could go and pull it off. I would say that as of now, Susan Crawford is by one of the narrowest margins you can possibly imagine favored. But you've seen this race split a lot from the 2023 race, which, in case you don't know, conservative candidate Daniel Kelly was routed by liberal candidate Janet Protasiewicz. He was defeated by 11%, which was a minor upset. You saw in the primary, Mitchell and Protasiewicz were the liberals. You did see 54, 46 in the primary in favor of the liberal candidates compared to the two conservatives, which was a warning sign, but you saw Kelly completely flounder in the general election. Um, do terrible in some of these Trumpian, driftless area counties. Even in some of these northern counties, he didn't run it up nearly enough to win statewide. And you also saw him do pretty terrible in the suburbs. Just looks like Trump voters across the entire state didn't turn out, and he wasn't able to do well with moderates or Democratic leaning voters in these suburban counties because he ran a terrible campaign. Now, other things to consider for this race was it was a relatively bad national environment for the GOP, and the GOP was significantly demoralized after their 2022 loss. And these elections, you could say, turnout's going to be a little bit better for Democrats, which I will say, if that's your only argument as to why this race will go Democrat, then I don't see why citing the polls is useful because these polls are not going to be able to catch any of the different turn. Like some of these polls, I think in general, use like a Harris plus 3 electorate, but like you won't know. You have no idea who's going to show up on election day because, as you saw, I don't know why the hell it did that. As you saw, in 2024, Trump made most of his gains in the rural areas of Wisconsin. Yes, he made some gains in Milwaukee and Dayton, even in the Bow counties. He did better than you would expect for a 0.9% win statewide, but he did lose a bit in these suburban counties. Kamala Harris targeted the WOW counties, Washington, Ozaukee, Waukesha, very heavily, and was able to somewhat narrow Trump's margins in these counties. These are more Republican down ballot, though, so do expect Schimmel to do better in these, especially better than Daniel Kelly, who, I mean, even as he lost by 11% statewide, he didn't do that bad compared to, like, if I took this map and shifted it 12% Democrat, like, then Ozaki would be flipping. He at least won that by 4. That's weird to think that. I'm saying anything positive about Daniel Kelly's electoral performance, but where he really fell off was these rural areas. What you could call the driftless area, which borders Iowa and the very south of Minnesota. Um, the northern areas of Wisconsin. I don't exactly have a name for them. But I'd say everything Eau Claire and up as the northern areas of Wisconsin. And then you can draw a line all the way to Outagamie County. Those are pretty big Republican vote netters, and they do seem to be shifting consistently Republican. And Republicans do net a rather constant margin out of them. It's not trending as Republican as some areas like Lafayette, Crawford, Grant, which that's ironic that we're talking about Crawford with the Democratic nominee being Susan Crawford. But these areas are the parts of Wisconsin that really fueled Trump's win in the state. But the northern areas do provide a solid base of support for Republicans to help them net votes. And then you have the Bow counties, Brown, Outagamie, and Winnebago. These are more suburban. As you see, they voted for Janet Protasewicz, but they do lean somewhat Republican in a more neutral Supreme Court election, 50-50. They would lean somewhat Republican. So I would say that really the only one I'd be worried about if I were the Schimmel campaign would be Winnebago County. This one's much closer on the presidential level. It also voted for Protasewicz by 8, when Outagamie was barely Protasewicz, and Brown was Protasewicz, but only by 4%. So I do think Oshkosh could potentially vote for Susan Crawford, especially if she was going to win by more than expected. But I would be hard pressed to see Outagamie or Brown County um, end up voting for Susan Crawford. Now, where Brad Schimmel's going to do better than Trump will be these suburban counties, but where Susan Crawford's going to do better than Kamala Harris will be these rural areas. As you saw, it was a 20-point shift in Jackson County. That's much more than the state at large shifted. Areas like Pierce, a Trumpless 17 county, ended up voting for Janet Protasewicz. So, so these areas are more Democratic down ballot. Grant County, another example, that is a Trumpless 18 county, and ended up voting for Janet Protasewicz by 2%. So these areas are the areas where Susan Crawford's going to probably um, do better than Harris, especially if she's going to go on to win statewide. It will come a lot from this area. Now, I don't expect her to win counties like Jackson, Pierce. She could win Dunn on a good night. But where she's really going to have to expand the Democratic coalition, well, she's obviously going to have to flip South County. South County was a very, very narrow Trump county. If she's not able to flip there, she has no white working class appeal, so she will have to be putting up these margins. Um, the WoW counties are spawn 100,000 voters out of Dane, which they could be possible, but neither one seems particularly likely. But she'll have to do better than that because these areas, even big swings, um, wouldn't net her too many votes. And if she's going to be not doing as well in Waukesha, Washington, Ozaukee as Harris did, she's going to have to win counties like Vernon, Crawford, Richland. I think Crawford and Richland will be two good bellwethers of this race. The counties I would watch: Crawford, Vernon, Richland does seem to be a little bit more Republican down ballot. It was only John Protasewicz plus 4, while Crawford was 8. and Vernon was nearly in line with the state at large at 10. I'd also say Winnebago County could be a good bellwether. Kenosha, maybe, but probably not. But what I would stick with Crawford, Vernon, and Winnebago. Both candidates want to do relatively well there, win at least 2 out of 3 of the counties to be able to win statewide. Um, I would say Vernon leans towards Crawford as of now, Winnebago towards Brad Schimmel. So Crawford County, ironically, will probably be a good bellwether. An example of a less partisan race, it's good to look at the most recent race, but the last race to be like down the wire, and then the last conservative win, because there have only been 2 seats up between this election and the 2025 election, was 2019. In a pretty massive upset, Brian Hatchthorne was able to defeat the overwhelming favorite Lisa Neubauer. Um, Neubauer was a liberal candidate. Brian Hedgehorn was the conservative. He won mostly because he was able to do good in areas like Waukesha, Washington, Ozaukee, like 69-31 Waukesha. Like, that is a Trumpless 20 county, and he's just casually winning that by 40%. Milwaukee, 62-38. He's getting 38% of Milwaukee. Trump got 30%. That's nearly a 20-point improvement here again. 75-25 in Washington County. That was a 68-31 county for Donald Trump. That it's less of an overperformance, but also it's pretty hard to win a county by like 80% of the vote. That's mostly suburban. And then Ozaki, he won 63-37. Trump won that county by 11. He won it by what is that? 26. Like, that is a pretty insane performance. And the reason he won so narrowly was because he didn't do good um really anywhere else. He did okay in the northern area of the state. Like, I won't pretend that some of these margins are particularly impressive, but they're relatively good compared to whatever the fuck that is. But where he really collapsed was these rural areas of the state. Like, I can pick out Vernon, not Vernon, Crawford County, uh, Neubauer plus 10. Daniel Kelly did better there than him. Trempealeau County was actually a very narrow Neubauer County. It voted for Daniel Kelly. Like, that's kind of insane that there are Neubauer Kelly counties, but that's what's happened. Part of it is like it's very easy to swing a minor county, so these counties just kind of swing wherever the hell they want. Jackson, Pierce, Dunn, all flipped. But even so, Pierce and Jackson were relatively close. So that's where Hatchadorn really underperformed Trump. That's why his win of, I mean, this is like 0.1%, which was narrower than Trump's 0.8% win in 2016. Um, you can definitely see the differences between these two coalitions here. This is why I think this race is the best thing to watch on election night. You will see a difference in the coalition because I really don't see Brian Hatchthorne. I really don't see Brad Schimmel being able to hit, what is that, 69% in Waukesha County. Like, that's going to take a miracle to do 18 points better than Trump there. And especially with Trump endorsing him, there's a lot of people who voted for Hatchthorne, or even more importantly, just didn't vote, who will turn out to vote for Crawford now. Like I said, this race was a very low turnout election. This was before these races were politicized, which is why Hatchthorne was able to pull off such a massive upset without many people knowing it beforehand. Because this was a local race back then. Like, the 2018 and 2019 Supreme Court races got like a headline the day after, and then no one talked about them. People talk about this race all the time. People talk about this race for months before it happened. Like, all the way from the primary in February 21st to the general election April 4th. Like, people were talking about this race. And the Wisconsin Supreme Court election in 2025 has gotten even more attention. Uh, these are rough numbers because I'm not completely up to date on the numbers out of this race. But in 2023, the general ballpark was about 30 to 35 million spent in total. Um, it was about even with both sides. Protasewicz did have a somewhat large edge, but I think Kelly closed in the end. Well, I'm not sure because I can't really find funding numbers for that anywheres, but think about 30 to 35 um, million. This race, Wikipedia says spending exceeding 59 million. That's not up to date. Spending has exceeded 75 million to the point where there are questions being asked whether this race will have 100 million in spending. To put that in perspective, the 2024 Senate election in Wisconsin had about half the spending as this race. Is projected to if it hits 100 million in spending. That is insane. That's that boggles my mind that there was that much spent over a Supreme Court election in Wisconsin. And that's why I think if Schimmel's going to win, he's going to have to do much better in these counties. He's going to have to win Grant, Lafayette, Richland, Trempealeau, all of those being flips from Hagedorn's win. And I really don't think Crawford has to flip any counties. All she has to do is do better in Milwaukee, do better in these suburban areas, cut down the Republican margin in the eastern portion of the state. Because if she does that, Madison, Milwaukee will be enough to overwhelm everywhere else. So, if Schimmel's going to be able to win this race, he's going to need relatively high turnout in these urban areas, these Republican counties where he's bound to net votes. If he's losing Ozaki or Waukesha County, he's losing by 20% statewide. Like people throw around, oh, he might lose Ozaki County. Like Daniel Kelly won that county by 4. It's gonna be hard for him to lose that county, especially when most polling shows him, you know, not at the highest, but at least mid to low 40s. Like polling shows him there. It's gonna be hard for him to do too much worse than Daniel Kelly. Or I mean, I think that it'd be a massive upset if he did as bad as Kelly, like even within the ballpark of this result. I'd say his floor is like a 6 to 7 point loss. Crawford's floor is like a 5% loss. Like I said, it's a close race, and it's hard to put your finger exactly on the margin because this depends on turnout. This depends on how partisan it is. Like the Trump endorsement will definitely help in these rural areas, but how much does it help? Like Trump won these areas by a lot, but they are pretty ancestral Democrat. You even saw this in the no, you even saw this in the House elections um out of Wisconsin. In the third district, like you saw reduced margins for Van Orden. Like Vernon was a 2 point margin. Remember that was like what 8 points statewide. Even voted for Eric Hovde by 3. Like these areas are more Democrat down ballot. Crawford was a 8 point win for Derek Van Orden. Grant was a 14 point win. Crawford was a 14 point win for Trump. That's a 6% underperformance. Grant was an 18 point win for Trump. That's a 4% underperformance. So you do see these areas more inclined to vote for a Democrat the further down ballot it is. And even in 2022, you saw Tony Evers win Vernon County, which even all the way back in 2020 was still like a Trumpless 5 county. So these areas can vote Democrat, especially since this race will be nonpartisan. I can definitely see Susan Crawford doing better there. In fact, I do think that even if she's going to get blown out statewide, she's at least going to win South County, which is the Trump county. Um, I don't see Schimmel winning that county. It was protest rates 16. That's 5% more than statewide. So had Daniel Kelly won by 5, he wouldn't have won South County. Um, that's a crazy thought, but it's going to be important to see how turnout is affected. Um, because Trump went out there and endorsed Schimmel. This is going to be a much more partisan election. This is going to be much more resembling the 2024 coalition than elections like 2019 or even 2023. You're going to see this election, like most things, begin to catch up to the top of the ballot. This, I think, was turnout. Daniel Kelly was a terrible candidate, yes, but I think his margin of victory would have been much less had the same voters who turned out in 2020 or 2024 turned out for this race. And with 100 million being spent, turnout is going to be much higher. And for the most part, that should help Republicans. We do have early voting numbers. These aren't updated as much as I would like. Oh, I leaked something. Ignore that. Um, but I will say this is a Republican source, and I have no idea where the hell he's getting these from. But in general, it does seem like Republican counties are outvoting Democrat counties. And here's the big thing: Milwaukee's all the way down here, but even Dane is behind the three WoW counties. Um, three WoW counties almost definitely will vote Republican. Like if they voted for Trump collectively by about 20 points or so, they're gonna vote for Schimmel, even if he's losing by 25% statewide. They're gonna vote for Schimmel. They're gonna net him votes, much in the same way that Dane, we know, will net Democrats votes. Like the Vernon County turnout isn't exactly important because Wisconsin doesn't do voter registration by party, so this is the counties in total we can't say like, oh, out of Ozaukee County, 50% of it is GOP, 40% of it is Democrats, 10% of it is independents. Like we don't know that. Um, we can't put our fingers on who is turning out exactly, but for the most part, none of these counties are really competitive. Kenosha, a bad night for Schimmel. Um, it could vote for Crawford. I neglected to mention it as a bellwether because I do think it'll catch up to the state's partisan lean. Like, after all, it was Trump plus six, nearly more lopsided than Racine County, which is an ancestrally Republican county. Even here, you saw the old coalition kind of resurface. Um, but Kenosha, maybe. Brown, it could potentially vote Crawford, but I still do think in most scenarios, Lee Schimmel will win the county. Winnebago, like I said, is kind of competitive. Portage, it's a down ballot election. Um, Neubauer won it by 8, even when she lost statewide. And Janet won it by 16. It was even a Harris County. So I'd say probably Portage ends up voting Democrat. But the rest of these we know. Like Walworth, which is here, we know will vote Republican. Even in 2023, it voted for Daniel Kelly by 10%. Washington, Waukesha, Ozaukee, we know will vote Republican. Um, Milwaukee, we know will vote Democrat. Dane, we know will vote Democrat. The big thing is that the Republican areas are outpacing the Democrat areas in turnout, which that was always the reason why originally I thought Republicans would win this race. I thought what would happen is Democrat turnout would be depressed after their 2024 loss, and we're seeing some of that come into fruition. I will say these numbers look eerily similar to 2020. They're better than 2023, but I don't know if they're good enough. We will have to see how these evolve. I'd say give it a few days. I would say give it a week, but like give it a week where it's the day before the election. So I want to wait until like the 25th or the 26th to see these numbers. Because for now, we don't know. And that's the big thing out of this race. I'm not going to give a concrete prediction. In fact, I'm not going to give a prediction until, I mean, probably March 31st. I don't think I'll do a prediction on the Wisconsin Supreme Court election on April Fool's Day, which for some reason is I mean, the U.S. is never going to have a federal election on November 1st. It's always November 8th. I don't know why Wisconsin's different. Like, a lot of elections that were in line with the 2021 Wisconsin April spring elections are now a week later, like Mayor of St. Louis. But that's against the point. This race, we don't know. And this is probably going to be more important than any poll because if you're seeing this turnout edge continue to exist, which Dane County, I will say, went up a little bit, 5.9 to 4.4. That's like a 1.5 difference here, 1.4. It didn't change that much. But the big thing is Milwaukee. Milwaukee's the one you want to watch because Milwaukee, especially in 2024, it picked up later into the cycle. And the fact that Milwaukee is this far away means that it probably is, it's going to pick up. Like, it's going to pass Winnebago, Portage, Racine, Walworth, Brown, probably. Maybe Kenosha. But it's probably not going to make it up above Washington, Waukesha, Ozaukee. And this is before Trump endorsed Brad Schimmel, so we'll have to see how that affects it. If you see a turnout spike in Republican areas, that's probably why. But this race is definitely one to watch. It's not a must win. I don't like saying that because a must win, like, really no election is a must win. You can recover from anything. But this is a pretty crucial election that both sides have invested a lot of time and a lot of money into. So we'll have to wait and see. I'll be covering this election a lot over the coming week, culminating with the election night stream April 1st. Set your calendars, but to be around then for when we have that stream, I'm losing my mind. I recorded this video before. Um, I recorded this video before, but I realized I messed up on some parts, so I'm I'm looping through it. Um, some of the old things I said in my head. I think I covered everything. I know I didn't bring up the Trump endorsement until like 20 minutes in, when I had talked about how it would affect the election. Um, my bad, people. But subscribe once again if you are new. Um, that helps out a lot. Uh, yeah, we are at. I can check now. We are at 1,983 subscribers. It's a very humbling number to see that many people have tuned in to support me. Um, it's kind of insane, and the support I've been shown uh, over this time, which has been a pretty hard personal time. Nothing to do with Wisconsin Supreme Court. I kind of forgot about this election for a little bit. It's nice to take my mind off some other things. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you guys so much. I love you guys. It's incredible that I have this platform to speak. It's deeply humbling that people at all care what I have to say. Um, yeah, it's surreal that I made it this far. But anyways, thank you for watching. Subscribe or don't, your choice. Thank you for watching. Godspeed. It's 4 a.m. Tester's done out.